and welcome to Heritage Key, which has recently opened and houses the British Music Collection. And welcome to Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival. I hope some of you may have been at the concert. This is day 7 of a 10-day festival, so forgive me if I'm looking a little bit weary-eyed. And it runs until Sunday. So lots to enjoy. Hopefully you'll see well, you will see some concerts today, but hopefully you will be able to stay a little longer and see concerts through to the weekend. I'm very pleased to welcome colleagues from Sound and Music and from NMC Recordings who have put together the events today, this Sounding Out session, which I'm very pleased we have at the festival. I've had the benefit of speaking at Sounding Out times in the past out of the country, and also the benefit of attending. And I always find that you can always learn something. You never stop learning, no matter how old you are. So I've always found them incredibly useful, and I'm sure you will today. And then we go into a series of concerts, which features work from a number of emerging composers out of higher education. And an incredible feat to pull all of that together. I remember sitting in an advisory group or panel right at the very start of thinking about the project in London, and there was Sound and Music and colleagues from NMC talking about engaging with every higher education establishment in the land. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, you know, is that really possible? Well, this today is the proof that it is really possible, and I think that's an incredible achievement that you've managed to pull that together, so really well done. I'm sure the concerts themselves will be very interesting and worth you going along and hearing the work. Professional development is something that we are very keen to see integrated into the Contemporary Music Festival. In recent years we've run European Composers Professional Development Programme that enabled us to send composers from the UK to both Italy and the Netherlands, and more recently we've been running with the Rossini Quartet Composers Kitchen, which again enabled us to send composers to work in Montreal and Quebec and bring the work back here. Composers Kitchen I'll say a little bit more about tomorrow, because again I'm very pleased that that's going to have a legacy now and be part of Sound and Music's embedded programme going forward. And what we do with professional development next time, I haven't quite decided yet. Every 3-4 years I quite like to refresh it and change what schemes we run. So enough from me. These people have got many more interesting things to say than I have. I'm going to sit at the back for a little while. I'm sure I'll learn some important things as well. And have a successful morning, and I look forward to joining you for the concerts later on today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Susanna Eastburn, Chief Executive of Sound Music, and it's fantastic to be here today, and particularly in the middle of such a fantastic panel of speakers. And there are pieces of paper with information about this. I won't read their bios, but it's just, I think we could have a really great discussion this morning as we bring together Ryoko, who runs her own label, Anne, who is in charge of NMC Recordings, Simon, who runs another Timbre, and then Shaun, who does lots of DIY recording. And I should say also that a big thanks to Shaun. We are, in fact, not streaming because we had some problem with the university Wi-Fi, but we are recording this. So it will go up on a YouTube channel. We're tweeting the link, so if people aren't here, they can catch up. If you want to hear it all again or watch it all again, you can do so in due course. So the format, basically I've got various sort of questions and sort of ideas, and it'll be just trying to hear some perspectives from the panel, from their experience. And I imagine we'll kind of range freely over both the sort of practical considerations of what it means to make a recording, together with maybe some kind of conceptual, ideological, theoretical ones. And there'll be lots of time for people to ask questions, interact, and just generally mine these good people for information. There were a few things I just wanted to announce. I've got a little list. Firstly, as Graham says, today, not only is Sounding Out, we have our next wave of concerts. There are 3 this afternoon. As Graham says, looking back, and he was part of that initial panel when we talked about reaching out to higher education institutions, working with them to identify an amazingly talented cohort of composers. And Graham said he thought, gosh, what a thing, you know. Believe me, that's what we thought too. But here we are, thanks to so many people, and there'll be proper thanks given at the end of the day. But I should say with complete confidence that these 12 composers are amazing, and the works we'll hear today are fantastic. So you have a real treat ahead of you. Such an incredible mix, and such an amazing group of people as well. That's been one of the many joys of working on this project, has been to see how they, as a group of 12, have really worked together to support each other. And hopefully kind of made links and friendships that will sustain them in what can, you know, being a composer's very challenging career. And it's also been, I have to say, a really important that has been partnering with NMC to record them, and which is now available for download. It's a very reasonable price. I bought one myself. And the 12 new works have been brilliantly performed by the musicians, brilliantly recorded, and I really urge you to get hold of that. So this afternoon, panellists are going to be offering one-to-one surgeries. So if you want the chance to actually sit down and talk in person individually to one of my colleagues surrounding me, that's possible. There are sign-up sheets on the other side of this wall here. Other things going on today apart from the concerts. So we are, I should say also, it's amazing to be here in Heritage Quay. I've also spent quite a lot of time sitting in sort of steering groups about this archive project, thinking, well, I'm sure it'll be great. And then suddenly, it's here, we're here. The British Music Collection will be moving in over time, over the next few months. There's a kind of incredible sort of storage facilities and opportunities to really kind of get into the material. But already, this space is just really fantastic. And later on in the day, there are tours, which there are 3 tours, and I think you can sign up for them at the welcome desk. And I would really urge you to try and do that, because it's also, this space here, it turns into this amazing kind of multimedia playground, for want of better words, where you can really kind of engage with lots of material that's been digitised. So it's a fantastic space, and it's fantastic to be here at last. With the collection, one of my colleagues, Harry Cooper, is here. She's got a sort of table. She's ready to talk to anyone about kind of interaction with the collection. If you're a composer, uploading works, how to really build your profile on the site. So she will be in this building in the morning and then moving over to the Creative Arts building in the afternoon. So do go and chat to her if you have any questions or want to. She's got a laptop, so you can go in online. And I should say we've also put together a game, which is Guess the Composer's Handwriting game, which is actually remarkably difficult. I, of course, immediately kind of dashed over and said, give me that, let me have a go. And I'm afraid I only got 2, so that's, I'm sure other people will do much better than me. Anyway, so I think that's all my announcements, so we should get into the discussion. I wanted to start by asking each of the panellists in turn what got you, so 2 questions, 2 linked questions. Firstly, what got you into recording? And secondly, what keeps you interested in being involved in it? And I thought I would start with Simon, if I may. Sorry.
Okay, well, I've been a fan of experimental music since I was a teenager, which is going back a long way. But it always was a sort of private passion, and I didn't really know anyone who was into the same sort of music, and I just got on with my life. But recording-wise, I ended up earning my living as a television sound recordist and documentaries. And then about 10 years ago, the quality of work that I was getting was down. Well, it was just becoming rubbish, basically. And I was getting very angry and frustrated with it. My partner said to me, you need to do something else because you're coming home and you're moaning all the time. And so I looked around and couldn't think of anything else that earned money that I could do. So that was the point when I decided to start a label, because I thought that is my passion sort of thing. But it's been totally proud to that point. I may as well do it, and I have to keep doing some television work. I still do, because that it's quite well paid, so I don't have to do many days to pay the bills, and then I do all the music stuff in the rest of my life. And so the recording, to some extent, although it's different recording documentaries and recording music, but the skills are already there to some extent, and I just transferred that into running the label, and yeah.
And what keeps that passion alive, assuming it is still alive?
It's very much. I mean, the label is very much a personal project in so far as I sort of curate it and just follow my own taste, and as that taste changes, I just go with that. So if I hear a snippet by a composer or an improviser or whatever, I think, well, that's really interesting, I'd like to hear more of that, then I'll approach them and try and do more of that and just put it on. So I just purely and simply follow the things that interest me, and I hope that enough people will buy the disc to sort of make it break even, which is all I would ever look to do. I'm not, never looking for it to pay the bills and make a living out of it, which kind of helps. It would be difficult to make a living out of the kind of music I release, but...
Thank you. And Anne, if I can turn to you, so how did you get into this business, and what keeps you?
Yeah, well, my first association with recording was my first job after university. I was working at the Royal Opera House in the orchestra office, and the orchestra signed a recording deal with Conifer Records, and I was put in charge of doing all the admin, so I got to see it sort of from that side. And then I left the Opera House and went to Collins Classics, which I subsequently ran. And my sort of private passion for contemporary music was brought to the table there, and we started doing more and more. For example, introduced the CD single, which was, I think, the first time contemporary music had been sort of presented in that short bite. So I'll never forget a chap phoning up one day and customer saying, these CD singles, this modern stuff, am I going to like it? And I said, well, I really don't know. But I said, look, we're only a £5, what else can you buy for £5? So I said, I'll tell you what, buy one. If you really hate it, I'll send you a £5 of my own money. So duly, 10 days later, the phone rang back. Bert was the love dancers. He said, this is amazing. Subsequently went out and bought all the rest. So that was quite a nice story. And then 10 years ago, I got involved with NMC. But it's interesting because looking back, I did my degree at Cardiff and I did performance and was always in the Welsh Music Information Centre, which was a broom cupboard upstairs, where they had, the scores and some bootleg tapes and things of contemporary Welsh music. And it sort of feels like a lovely full circle for me in a way, because so much of what NMC does is about giving that legacy and permanence to the work of leading British composers, and I think that's what keeps me going. That there is always good work, there is always an audience, and we have to stay around to connect the two together.
Ryoko, what about you?
Okay, so since I was a child, I always liked music and played some pianos and electrical and etc. etc. Then I got into playing bands as teenagers do. And after that, I studied sound engineering, and that's probably when everything changed in my life. That what electronics can do, and how much I'm interested in this kind of movement. I was already in England at that time. I was 18 and 19, and discovering different genres of music through studying electronics and sound engineering in this college. And then I started my first label, NMC Records, that was called. And everything's been always personal to me, just like Simon said, it's always personal, personal development and personal kind of searching for opportunities and understanding of myself in a way. And then when I so 2005, I sort of stopped everything for a while, my hibernation time in life. And I came back when I was 2011, and I started to create more and regaining passion and got inspirations from different people. And then I started my Melange edition in 2014. Yes, 2014, including the planning experience. It was 2013. So that's how I am here. What keeps me alive? What keeps me alive? I think in different era of my life, there's always a key person or key point that kind of maneuver my life. You know, it's like a turning point. And then that's like an accumulation of networks and meeting up with people that always keeps me alive. Like important people, important piece of music. It's always something when I think about my history. And that's actually get me going. Yeah. Thank you. And Shaun?
Yeah, I started similar ways to Ryoko really, of just playing in sort of rock bands. My background is very much post-punk, DIY ethic, sort of back labels like Postcards, sort of records, things like that. There's a band called Desperate Bicycles who put their own stuff out. They used to list everything, every bit of money that was spent, and they did this great song called The Medium Was Tedium, which was basically about going out, forming a band, sort of, you know, that whole learn 3 chords, start a band of punk. But the post-punk movement started getting into interesting sounds like Public Image, Pop Group, kind of sparky, but with a great sense of anything was possible, including putting records out, touring. You don't need management, you don't need record labels, sort of, if nobody will touch you, just do it yourself. So I've sort of stuck with that for the last nearly 30 years now. I run one of the first net labels, sort of basically giving free stuff away, experimental stuff called Earthquake Productions. So that started in 2006, released 75 free downloadable things from sort of free jazz to electronic dance music, quite a hodgepodge again. It was a personal thing of, I loved every single thing I put out. And when I wound that up, we'd had just short of 1 million downloads. We were sort of in all those sort of listings, we were in the top 5 net labels in the world. But then I thought, sort of my last album was downloaded 35,000 times, but I haven't made a penny. So it's when I started looking at releasing my own stuff and got into things like Bandcamp, pressing up my own stuff, just generally trying to work through this where we're at the moment of the big debate. Spotify obviously at the moment, with sort of everyone follows popular music. Taylor Swift has made a big thing about pulling all her albums from Spotify. And as far as recording, actual physical act of recording, it was much the same thing of paying a fortune to go to studios and arguing with people that I wanted to sound really scrappy, not like Phil Collins, which was the big thing in the 80s of putting all that big reverb on drums, and it's like, no, I want it to sound like Stooges, mate. So it was like, why don't I buy equipment? And with technology, it's got more and more so of, you know, you can have a 6-track recording device like the Zoom H6 in your pocket, some microphones, and you've got a little mobile recording system. So, you know, why not do it yourself? It just involves, maybe if you don't actually go to college or anything, it's just trial and error really, till you get the sounds you like. And passion-wise, and why I still do it is there's just constantly stuff that just takes the top of your head off. I got told at school at the age of 13 that I should stop wasting my time listening to music, and ended up going to the shipyard in Barrow. Then got made redundant 10 years later, and then started doing what I really wanted to do. And I've been professional for 15 years now, so I think it's just finding stuff like your label, the Lawrence Crane stuff. I've just been hammering that. It's such a lovely work. People like Ryoko that you come across on the internet or get introduced through friends, and you get that nice support system sort of going. And yeah, that's me, I think.
Thank you. And so I have a million questions for all of that, but actually there's a couple of things actually, Shaun, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind pulling out a couple of things you said and just maybe opening them up to the panel a little more. Firstly, quite practically, this may be helpful for people who are either here or watching. So, when you're doing your own recordings, your DIY approach, so you've talked a bit about the equipment you need. So if someone was to want to do it themselves, what would you suggest? How do they go about it?
If you've got no technical experience, start on the internet reading up about things. Like, if you've got to record a harp, look online, how do you record a harp? What sort of microphones do you need? If you can't afford microphones, do you know anybody that's got microphones? Maybe do a bit of skills for. I've just slowly built up a collection of cheap mics, but I've researched them so they're actually good mics for the money, and I'd like to get as much value for money out of what I buy as possible, because that's just, I guess I'm tight northern. But definitely pooling resources is a great way forward. But I've got, most of you will have a laptop, get a decent sound card, so you can put multiple things in, and just experiment with it. There's no reason why you couldn't do DIY orchestra recordings with a bit of group thought on the subject. People with the experience, they might be able to go to a surgery, a thing like this, and talk to somebody.
I've never recorded an orchestra in my life, so don't have to.
Or you might talk to the university. Being at university is a good example of you've got stuff around you that you can use. And again, it's just making sure that it sounds like you want it to sound, ultimately, which might be completely wrong to technically minded people. But I think, at heart, the best recordings of music are the things that grab you emotionally, and that will always be the case. Whatever it could be, that you just set a rehearsal up and you record it on your phone, but if it's got that spark, that's the one. Always look for that, and not go for technical. Is my core value, I think.
So that's a really refreshing perspective, and also one that is much more graspable, I guess, as it becomes harder and harder for composers, musicians to have their music recorded. But I was actually interested in sort of opening it up to the wider panel about what beyond the music itself, what's the secret of a good recording? Do you agree with what Shaun said? Are there things you would add or differ? What's the hallmark of a really great recording?
Well, I continue on the story. I've got children myself, and we do some recording and we talk about music. And how I started with them is I never gave them iPads. I know that every child on this planet now probably has an iPad, but my children hasn't even touched iPad. But we started with the tape recorder, and then we're moving on to the vinyl listening. And then I think we probably going to move on to something else. Maybe I'd probably introduce mini discs. I don't know. But I think it's quite interesting to actually go back to the primitive idea of music. And we also play some different instruments, and then we make instruments. And I quite like the idea of not directly going into the high technologies with expanding possibilities, and actually narrow yourself down and see what they're interested in. And because I find that with a laptop you have numerous opportunities and you kind of get lost where you want to get out. Because you want to try to do one thing and then you discover millions of things and then you actually don't remember what you really wanted to do originally. And I don't want my children to kind of experience that right now. And I want them to find out how music started in a way, like how physical it was and everything, and then probably move on to the other part. And I quite like this kind of approaches to step by step. And probably it goes into the DIY process of how much people can create something by themselves.
So can I just ask, so when you're making a record for Reynell,
yeah,
what's how do you go about ensuring high quality of recording?
High quality practically. I mean, with my music, I always choose what I want to use first. And then, for example, my newest solo album, I just used 2 synthesizers because there's one very limited synthesizers in this university I really wanted to use. And then I thought, that's it, that's what I'm going to use. And then for recording-wise, I chose the studios and I wanted to get as clear recording as possible. That's a different matter. It goes into a little bit of high-tech business. You have to find out what is available in front of you, to get the best results. So the recording is a bit different from how I choose materials. But there's always something that's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. That's it. And I don't want to explain about its period.
So in a way, just so I can understand, so it's almost, the process of making a recording is actually marrying of the equipment and material that you have at your disposal with the artistic idea, so the two actually go hand in hand. Yeah.
I was actually going to pick up on exactly that point. I mean, I may be wrong, but I would wonder whether the sort of DIY, if we can use that shorthand, where composers are recording their own work, almost the recording process is perhaps part of the creative process, which is actually quite different from our approach, where we are, I don't want to use the word archiving, but we're preserving, if you like, the work of others. And there's a slightly different sort of impetus, and we have to be very true to what the composer wanted. Unfortunately, the reality, if you're buying an orchestra for a 3-hour session, you have to get it right. The costs, and so it's probably far more sort of prescriptive in a way. But even within that, I think there is an interesting dialogue going on between engineers and producers as to what the approach is, particularly with a lot of labels and orchestras having their own live labels, which is perhaps the nearest equivalent to the DIY. Is one looking to recreate the concert experience, or are you looking to preserve something slightly elastic? And I think that will affect the approach to the recorded sound, and that whole thing of precision, and your example of the reverb together, that technique, the artistic choices that Phil Collins big part of it. It's a slightly different approach.
I have to say, having sat in on some of the next wave recording sessions and seeing how David Lefebvre, who's the engineer on that, how he was actually such an integral, and actually capturing those pieces on recording is such a different thing from how we're going to hear them today.
Yes, I think so, yeah. And I think there's no harm in that.
It was a real education. And that's maybe another thing actually to think about, is actually attending recording sessions is an absolute education itself. Simon, do you agree? Where do you sit on this in terms of the balance between sort of making it from what you've got there, preserving it? Where do you sit in that?
in the middle probably. I mean, I think that every piece ideally should have its own aesthetic and therefore its own recording strategy. So,
yes.
For instance, earlier this week there was the Feldman concert with multiple pianos. A lot of those pieces with the same musicians I recorded for a CD that was going to be launched, and the BBC were recording it for Here and Now. And I noticed the way they were recording it, which is sort of fairly standard way of doing it, but it was very different to the way I recorded it. And I'm not going to say mine is better, but mine is what I wanted.
How is it different?
Right, the BBC had microphones up directly above the pianos, but at least 1.5 meters away from the strings. So you will hear quite a lot of the hall and reverb of the sound within the hall and so on, which is fine if that's what they want. But when I did it, because for me, Feldman's music, the key thing about it is it's really intimate music. I mic'd it a lot more closely, and then that meant I then had to spend weeks cutting out bits of pedaling noise and the sort of extra noises that you come picking up because you're so close to the string. But I was after a very, very different. I haven't heard the BBC recordings, but I can imagine what they're going to sound like. I was after something different. I was after that intimate, kind of contained sound, and that's. And as I say, there's no right or wrong about that, but that is what I wanted to achieve, but that brought with it certain, techniques and a strategy for recording, which is very different. And I hope that the recordings I've done will, not condemn those pieces to aspect, but will last a long time. But it's very different from what I took to be the more conventional way of recording that was being done in concert.
More conventional, and maybe a sense of place as well. I don't know. And there is,
possibly. And also, obviously, they haven't got the time probably to kind of spend loads of time cutting out bits of pedal noise and things like that, because John Tilbury's radio, it does make a lot of noise.
That also goes back to the thing of the sort of purpose of the recording. So obviously, I'm presuming that in the BBC instance is what I was saying. That's a broadcast of a performance, which isn't what your CD is there to achieve. So that's perhaps another question for people to ask themselves: is actually what's the function, what's the purpose of the material, of how I'm recording my material? Where do I want it to be disseminated, and how do I want it to be received? Because I think that would perhaps ought to be an approach.
And it is interesting with so I can see my BBC colleagues chuckling it back. And it is interesting listening to broadcasts from Huddersfield is that when they're from St Paul's Hall, it's got such a sense of place, which maybe isn't what you're after in your recordings in that way. The other interesting point you alluded to in your talk, Shaun, is you talked about having run your net label and it getting sort of millions of downloads and not making any money. So two really interesting things in that. So firstly, how do you get, in this world where everyone's streaming, everyone's recording, everyone's putting stuff out online, how do you get noticed?
I've done it over a series of years, very slowly, staying true to what I want to do, which is you always keep getting to points where you can either go that way, where your artistic side is pointing, or that way where there's a scene that might just take you somewhere, or if you sounded a bit like that, why you might pick you up a bit more. I've tended to always go that way, which I don't know if it's good or probably stupid in many ways, career-wise. But I do a lot of workshops with young people. That's a big part of my practice. I like a lot of what I do has to have a sense of community. Again, I come from quite a left-wing background, sort of that whole sort of post-punk thing, very politicised during the miners' strike and things like that. So I kind of want to be. It's like the album I've got coming out next is it's called Some Unicorn. It's something I've been doing while I've been a new voice composer of sound and music, and that's got 30 artists on it that I've never met. I just did some recording, put it out there, played along to it, and then sent it back, and I spent a couple of months editing that into something that very luckily all the artists think it's fantastic, so I'm really pleased with that. But again, it's that sense of community of, even if you're the one making the decisions, if it's not connecting you with people, I really don't see the point. I'm not really money orientated, so I don't know. Does that answer the question?
It kind of. I suppose it was. I think it's a really interesting thing for someone who's particularly getting going in the profession to think about how, if you are going to record your work, either by approaching a label or doing it yourself. The point of doing that is to get the work out there. So if I understand rightly, you start from a kind of community of people who are making work together in different ways, and in some ways it kind of goes out through dissemination via those networks.
So I know Ryoko through Festival of Noises, Love Noises Festival in Barrow. Ryoko's come over and played a few times, so we've got to know each other. And then we got to know each other through the internet. Then we know some of the same people in Sheffield. So kind of you get gigs through that, working in the improviser field that I'm working. I guess it's at some point you've got to grasp the business side of it. So at base, you've got to put food on your table and a roof over your head. It's these the very basic level of existence, if you know. So you've got to find some way of making some money, and that's up to you. I wouldn't like to tell you how to do that. If you want lots of exposure, try and get a bit more money and get a decent plug in the jazz world. If you can get a right squad, sort of, if you can afford them, you'll get some decent write-ups. Sort of. I'm sure it's the same. There's certain PR companies in the contemporary classical world that will really push you up there if you've got the money. Again, it just eventually it starts falling into a certain business model. Sort of.
Simon, I was going to say, how do you do it, Simon?
Basically, all that side.
So we all know your recordings. Like, how's that happened?
I've got a website, and that's it. But all that side of the label, distribution, promotion, publicity, and I hate it because it's just not my personality, and I'm crap at it. So I just spend as little time as possible doing it. And I just hope that word of mouth spreads, that there's some stuff here that's worth listening to. I'm really not the person to ask about those things. But, I can't afford to employ someone to do it for me, and yet I hate it. So I love doing the recording and the editing, and that's what I spend all my time doing. And I just hope that the rest of the label looks after itself on the other side.
Okay. Ryoko, is that your approach as well? Put it out there and hope that people like it.
It was funny because I just put one album on Simon's label, and I remembered when it came out, he actually emailed me saying, "I'm not doing any promotions. Just do it." Yeah, and just it's easy. I quite share a lot of common sense with Simon. I'm not good at promoting and doing all those sorts of stuff. But at the same time, I do basic stuff. I have some distribution companies which would take our labels, music, CDs. We do have a website. And it's really word of mouth that, when something comes out, I do talk about it on Facebook, which is linked to Twittering. Tweeting. So there's a little sense of advertisement going on, but that's all I do. And I'm quite happy about it.
I think part of it is that very different situations, but neither of us need to make a living from it. So, as I said before, as long as my label breaks even, I'm happy, and I have a day job, which I'm very lucky, it's a well-paid day job, so I only need to do 1 or 2 days a week, and I can survive, sort of thing. Because I don't live in London, that helps as well. But I think that is something to think about, especially people at the beginnings of their career, is, you know, do you want to earn your living from music, or do you want to do something else purely functionally and do music in the rest of your time? And I mean, there's arguments both ways, and again, you know, there's no general answer to that. But I certainly remember talking to an improviser who I did a disc with a few years ago, and he was absolutely definite that he never ever wanted to confuse music and money. That he lives in London and teaches English as a foreign language, and that's one side of his life. And then he felt that the fact that he earned his living there meant that he didn't have to look to money ever to make, didn't have to look to music ever to make any money, and he felt that made his music more interesting to him, and that the minute he started taking on gigs or pushing for gigs in order to get some financial benefit from it, he felt that would sort of corrupt his music in a way, and he just didn't want to do it. I mean, that's a very extreme position, but it's a kind of interesting one, and you know, different people have to take up their position in relation to that on an individual basis. But I think there is something to be said for that.
How you create a balanced life.
Yeah.
Just to rewind you a little bit, and so, and one thing I picked up from the three of you is effectively through your recordings, effectively get out through a kind of expanding community of friends, colleagues, fellow musicians, etc. Which I guess, and is that, how does that compare with NMC, where it's like different approach?
Yeah, I mean, the starting point is very different.
Yeah.
And I suppose in a way, I would say, you know, we care equally for the music as you guys do. I think you know, that has to be the starting, that's our founding principle, the starting. But I suppose our approach to how we display that is our desire to have, because we believe in it so passionately, is to take the opposite approach in a way that, you know, we have to get it out. We want to get it out.
How do you get noticed? What do you do?
Well, we have, you know, we're a team of 2.5 people. So that's a start, you know, there are bodies there. We distribute physically throughout the world. We distribute digitally to 140-something countries. We contact press, you know, we write press releases, we work with distributors who develop promotions with stores. We are constantly discussing projects and ideas with colleagues in the media, print, radio. The interesting similarity, though, is the point of looking to our own networks and the networks, the community of the composers. And that's something that there's a very, very different approaches between, if one can generalise, the older, perhaps published composers who have, and I think there's a real parallel between what's happening in the publishing world and the recording world, which we might just touch on. But we look to those networks as well to help us spread the word. And increasingly, particularly the younger composers, they have their websites, they tweet, they Facebook, they do all these things. And that's a really, really valuable network. And of course, that's the network that means that you can connect perhaps more directly with your audience. You know, it's great that we've got these fantastic distribution channels, and you know, we're out through iTunes and everywhere all over the world. But you know, that the downside of that is that you don't have the immediate connection with your audience, and you know, the holy grail of data of your audience. But just going back to the comparison perhaps to the publishing, it's very interesting. I was talking to a young composer just last week, and we were talking about this whole thing. They self-publish, they self-promote, and they are quite relatively early in their career of doing this. They're already finding attention between how they divide their time and actually their energies and their headspace, between being a promoter and actually being a composer. And you know, partly one's like, you know, your job's to compose, our job's to get it out there. Is perhaps another way of thinking about it.
Although the reality is now, with, as you say, the kind of recording, publishing, you know,
they're not being taken on. The model is
changing, but it's No, I agree. It's attention and something we talk about all the time. Isn't it? My $1 million question for you, Anne, is how do you decide what to record? And I say this having in mind that the 12 next wave composers in the various feedback we've had, all of them have absolutely highlighted the recording being such an important part of it for them. And that high quality recording on NMC being really valuable. Clearly, you cannot record everybody. How do you choose?
It's a very difficult thing, and it's an approach that we've perhaps moulded over the years. NMC's been going for 25 years. What we have now is we have structures, so we have artistic panels that advise us, we have external experts that come in to help us. We're very keen to be an open doors organisation, so we welcome proposals from composers, artists, agents, whatever. Which is all great. Of course, the downside of that is you then have a deluge and you risk becoming very reactive. And that's probably one of the big differences between how we operate. I'm sure you're entirely proactive. You basically just do what you want to do. So there is an element for us that we have to balance that. We also have to balance that in the context of our budgets. We are a registered charity. We're very fortunate and very proud to be an Arts Council NPO. But it's hard to make the money work. So we have to look across a year's output and develop a balanced release schedule that's balanced in terms of scale, that's balanced in terms of how the money is going to work. Some projects come in funded, others need a lot of financial input from us, more financial input from us. And trying to present a balance of repertoire, artistic styles, young composers, emerging composers. We then have different artistic partnerships that will generate a couple of projects a year, which we will work up in conjunction with those artistic partners. So there are lots of routes, and I would say if anyone's interested or wondering, just write to us.
But you must get sent a lot of great stuff. So imagine that I'm a sort of less established composer. I want to somehow get your attention in this deluge of great material receiving. What would make me stand out?
The first thing we will do is listen to the music.
Right.
And the quality of the music and the people, the practitioners that are going to present that music, the artists. Then beyond that, we will have to look at the costs and the financial. And I think crucially for us, increasingly for us, is how projects can help us connect with our existing audience and with new audiences. So if you're a composer who's, crucially, another really important aspect is looking ahead. So saying, next year or in 18 months' time, I'm planning on doing this kind of tour, or I've got a series of concerts, or I've got this concept that I want to develop. We can then perhaps discuss working with them so that we can use that project to develop our marketing and our audience reach, which is increasingly important. Sadly, we do often get projects, proposals where people say, I'm doing this concert in 2 months' time, could you put out this recording? No. The mechanics just aren't there. And that's partly, I suppose, a reflection of how we work with our distribution networks. There are timelines built in there. We'll look at all those aspects. But the first thing is always the artistic excellence. Yeah, the music's the first thing. But how we can use it to broaden the reach of NMC. Because we're very conscious as well, and it's one of the things of being a label, being a brand, is that people come to us through one project, but then we have this huge treasure chest of other work that we hope the audience will stay with us to discover. So we're constantly looking to broaden the net.
And Simon, I was going to ask you the same question because your label is greatly revered and it's very led by your own personal passions. But so again, imagine I'm a composer that you don't yet know, but I think you really like my stuff. How would I get your attention?
I get lots of that, and lots of people sending me links and CDRs. And when I started, I was very diligent about listening to everything and replying to everything and trying to assess everything. I'm afraid because of shortage of time, I've now got to say, I still don't say I have no submissions to these, but there are a lot of things that I listen to 2 minutes and just that's it, and just sort of send in the thank you sort of thing, which is...
But you do, but you are...
But I'm open to submissions, and some of the most successful discs that I've done, led to continuing relationships, have been things that have just been sent to me out of the blue, so I'm open to that still. In theory, in practice it becomes more and more difficult, the more I receive, because the amount of time I have go down rather than up. So.
And is there anything over and above the quality of the music that would tip the decision?
No. The only thing is, the way I tend to operate is I release discs in batches, so I'll have, say, 4 or 3 or possibly 5 released at the same time. Now, if I release 4, one of them has to be something that I think is going to sell well enough to basically subsidise the other ones. So this current lot I've released, obviously I'm hoping Feldman is going to sell enough copies that although it's quite expensive to pull together and do the recording session, nonetheless those costs will be covered, and it will also subsidise the costs of the other discs. And that's so within a batch there has to be some kind of economic guess about how it's going to work. But basically, if someone sends me something, I think, wow, that's fantastic, I will release it whatever, even if they're unknown name.
Fantastic. And Ryoko, you, as well as your own music, you have included other composers on your label various times. How do you choose what's the patterns there?
Whether I like it or not. The second release, it's just been, it's going to come out in 2 weeks' time. I had a list of people who I really want to work with, and I think that's another point that I have to address, that those people must be people who I want to work with. So I think that's an advantage of having a small label. I can just think about that as a primary point. And I have a list of people. I mean, I always have this awareness because I'm always a minority person. When I'm in England, I am a Japanese person. When I'm back in Japan, I'm a person who's been abroad for a long time. And then I'm a female artist who's been doing electronic music for a long time. So I'm always a minority, if you agree. So I'm aware of that all the time. So for example, the last release, or this release coming up, is an artist called Dawn Scott. And then she works a lot with installation, glasses, she does performance as well. And I had about 10-15 people that I really enjoy the music of, and most of them are, of course, male. And I'm not feminist at all in a kind of explicit way, but I thought that, oh look, I just have to think about this really hard, that what I want to do with this. And then I didn't choose Dawn just because she's female, but I realized that all of the male artists who I wanted to take up on have done so many things. So they've done so many publications, they've done so many works. And then Dawn was the one who has been doing so many things, but it hasn't had many publications out. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to work with Dawn. I really want to do that with her. And that comes to different ideas within what I do. So I'm always aware of something. For example, it's a bit different, but I work with this journal, and I'm a co-editor of this reductive journal. And then when we decide which artists are going to do some works or contribute some audios and writings to the journal, my first question is there any black sound artist, for example? Is there anyone in India who does sound art? That kind of like thinking about something else that can be really interesting, rather than just staying in where I am and just creating the network between us. Always thinking about what can be found somewhere. Just considering the minority. And it's quite important for me. Yeah.
It's very interesting indeed. And, God, I could go into a whole discussion about as a feminist. It's a great. And also thinking about kind of new music generally, and again, this is something at Sound of Music we are thinking about a lot, is really how we can constantly kind of push out the range of people who are creating new music in different ways. And it's great working with Dawn, who was actually an embedded artist in sound music with the Forest now. So, I was going to open up for questions now. If anybody would like to put anything to Paul or Sam or the panel, then we can attempt an answer. No? Okay, well luckily I've got a couple of other questions up my sleeve. I was going to ask each of the panel, and Anne's alluded to this, the record, when I first got going in the music industry all those years ago, the recording industry was so very different in every single way, and it's gone through absolute transformation and continues to do so. Looking into your crystal balls, what would you advise people wanting to get going in recording? What do you think they should be alert to in terms of things that are coming up, trends, etc.? I'm going to start with Anne, actually.
I think the CD is here to stay. Eventually, probably another format will emerge. Betamax, but not for a while, probably. Sam, I think, alluded earlier to the Spotify issue. I think that's where the big changes are going to happen. Downloading. It's quite interesting because NMC was relatively early with the whole digital. At a time when our colleagues in other classical labels just really were running a mile. It was a pop thing. We embraced it, and it's been a fantastic success for us. We have had approaching 1 million downloads. The difference being that they've been paid for, so money has come in to further purposes of the charity, but far more crucially, money has trickled down to the composers and the creators, which I think we have to remember that we're here to serve. So formats, I think, is a big issue. It's been interesting over the last year that download sales have really slipped and streaming has exponentially grown. So I think one of the big changes and challenges is going to be how the streaming services come up with a better model, financial model that's more sustainable. Ironically, that's kind of less of an issue for us because we're a charity. A little bit like Simon, we're not here to get rich, but the streaming model does give us a huge opportunity to reach out to audiences, so it actually helps us fulfill our charitable purpose. And I think the other big thing, which perhaps goes back to our start point of recording quality, is there's increasingly going to be a drive for digital formats. So my colleagues who are far more technical than me could tell you the difference between a FLAC and a this and a that. But that's where the big change is going to be. That high resolution downloads are going to be the sort of order of the day. So that's possibly something to think about. How you record to that standard, so that your standard is going to be fit for the future.
So there's sort of two interesting kind of split between both the kind of the object is here to stay, the thing, the product, but also streaming an ever higher standard being attainable and probably expect from the half of the business.
So, yeah. And that goes hand in glove with practical and physical development.
Yeah.
Someone was saying the other day that apparently the new cars all have, digital this and Jeep and whatever, so the ability to stream in different, functions and what we're driving along now becomes possible.
Yeah.
So, if you want your material to be accessed through those routes, you kind of have to meet the technical standard that those routes can require.
Yeah. There's also a kind of, and there's an interesting example recently, it's not quite evil, but there's a sort of a sinister partnership between Uber and Spotify, where you can link your Uber and your Spotify accounts, and so in your Uber car you can have your playlist, which I guess is okay. Is that okay? Is that okay? Anyway, and I should say also, presumably all of that, everything you just said is absolutely predicated on composers being registered with PRS. And I'd say any kind of emerging composer who's not registered with PRS It's a good idea.
That is the first thing. That is the first thing. And having actually equipping yourself in the same way that one might equip oneself with how to record a harp. Equip yourself with understanding rights. I've always been astonished when we've done various collaborative projects with, actually not always just with emerging composers actually, the real gap in understanding about rights. And so I would say that's a very important first step.
And brief sound music plug here. We've got a section about that in the Composer's Toolkit on our website, so it says what you used and where you need to go. Ryoko, what does your crystal ball tell you about the future? What people should take into account if they're getting involved in recording?
I think everything she said is actually right, but I'm against the dreaming and like freedom or well, anyway, I think you've got to see what you really want to do. So as long as the streaming goes with the new technology, I think the high standard recording, going for the high standard recording is the right way of thinking. But I think people's got to put this in mind that there is another interesting way of recording the space. So, like, for example, in another project that I'm doing, I'm actually using the tape machines to record all of the equipment deliberately so that we get that kind of quality. And sometimes I don't mind people talking about recording cassette tape recordings, or I think it's just really up to what people want to do with it. And to me, I really believe in the CD releases, this physical edition of it, and it's something about it, and I'm so much, so passionate about this physical edition, so I stick to that. But it's just me that everyone's got to understand what they want to do, and it's probably that first question maybe.
And that's an interesting kind of split. Also, what you've alluded to is both. So the potential standard of recording is sort of ever higher tech, but also there's kind of low tech.
Yeah.
You can sort of going both ways, which I suppose I kind of pick up is happening a bit as well. I don't know, Shaun, what's your take on that, and also your crystal ball? Your crystal ball?
Definitely Spotify, and I'm a big fan of Spotify. I think with Spotify and other streaming services, it depends how you look at them and what their function is. People that look at it as a replacement for physical objects and recording work and selling stuff, it doesn't pan out very well. But if you hold it up against radio, the per listener sort of pay that you get is much higher than you would. That actually worked out. Getting one play on Chris Evans on the Radio 2, he has about 8 million listeners. And you get, I think it was actually off the BBC site about the figures, and I think it was £75 for a play on Chris Evans for 8 million. If you got 8 million players on Spotify, I think it was 31,000 at the lowest rate. So figures can be loaded either way. You've got to go, well actually, but exposure-wise, would play on Chris Evans actually be better for my career if we did those 8 million random players on Spotify. But streaming is here, I think. I use it in the office as I pretty much like radio, and I've actually spent more money on buying CDs since I've been listening to Spotify. So that's good. Then you want that extra quality and the tactileness of having the CD in your hands. There's another, I've just come across a thing called Cash Music that's similar to Bandcamp, but they say all the money will go to you. Not quite sure how it works. There's got to be various things like that, but vinyl's in a very healthy state, to the point of it's destroying itself, because the train gets pressed now, and if you get stuck in record store day, they just drop all the sort of young artists for the big companies, because the whole industry is key towards record store day predominantly, and there's no new plants being built because it's so expensive, so there's finite resources to actually press vinyl. And cassettes actually come back in the kind of underground noise scene, lots of limited edition, 50, 100 copies. I don't know quite how that pans out. As an improviser, you could release everything that you play. If you look at it as an instant composition, I think too many people to put everything out. So I think it's, at the heart, it's how you want to present yourself, I think. I think another Timbre is a really good example of, there's a look, there's an aesthetic to the label. I think I've got about half a dozen releases, and you can tell it's a release with the label, and it looks beautiful. You like having it in your hand. The music's always quality, sort of very well recorded, sort of so you have brought some free CDs for me, haven't you? Well, no, I think it's very much like labels like 4AD in the sort of rock world. They looked quite similar, the same design there on the sleeves, but you kind of knew what you were getting. You built a certain amount of trust in the label, sort of after a while. So. Yeah, it could go anywhere, but I think it's keeping fairly quick on your feet and doing what's best for you. It could be that 500 CDs. So I was working some maths out. So I'm just getting 500 CDs that'll be arriving in the next couple of weeks, and it's cost me about £800 in total to get them produced. So I'll sell them for £8, so if I sell 100, I'll break even, because it hasn't cost me anything recording, because it was just an online project. So if I sell 200, I make £800 profit. If I sell 400, 100 going out as promos, I'll have made just under 2,500, which can go back into the next release. But 400 doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually is. The more away from the mainstream you go, the figures do get lower. But no, I like CD myself as a format.
Simon, what do you think what do you think people should be mindful of going ahead if you're getting going with recording?
I mean, again, I'm sorry, it's like asking me about publicity. I'm completely hopeless with all this stuff, because I don't stream, I know what these things are, but I don't understand them. At the minute, the music on another Timbre is only available CD. I haven't even managed to get it together because I don't quite understand the technology to pay for downloads of it, which I should do. But, I'm not...
Why do you feel you should?
Because Anne's right, there are people out there who are prepared to pay for downloads to some extent, and that is a good way of making the label more viable and paying for other projects in the future, sort of thing. So I should, in that sense, I'm just hopeless with technology beyond the small amount I have to do what I do. So and I'm not advocating that as what other people should do at all, obviously. But the one thing I would say is that it may come from my sort of Luddite attitude towards it all, but I do think, I think you're right, that actually there was a time when it looked like the physical object was going to go, but I think actually it is going to stay. And that's partly because I think for 10, 15 years the internet had a sort of cachet of, this is new, this is trendy, this is exciting, therefore, orient towards that. Whereas actually I think we're through that phase, and obviously everyone's life involves the internet, whether you're buying books or whatever, or looking at newspaper or whatever. The internet is now part of your life, but in quite a boring way, and it no longer has that sort of cachet of being new and fresh to have something online. So I think it's, looking 20 years ahead, I hope, in my Luddite way, I hope that actually there will be an appreciation of physical objects, but also, say, the event last night, the late concert last night, Tim Parkinson's opera, which was weird and wonderful and fantastic and could never be captured digitally. And I was, you know, the experience of actually being at this live performance of this very bizarre event, I mean, you call it a piece of music necessarily, that has sort of, for me, a really great freshness about it, which is a useful direction to think of going in if I was a composer, if I was in music, to think of something that's completely offline and cannot be reproduced online. I think that is, I would like to think that in 25 years there's going to be more of that.
I think that's a great point to end on. But are there any final questions for anyone in the room? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's related to what Shaun said about the quality of things and not using a performance record. Thank you very much. And also Simon's thing about how you don't necessarily experience everything from a format recording. This is all open to the panel. What do you think the point of recording is and releasing it, apart from promoting and things like that? Because, for example, things with improvised music, like that cannot be reproduced as well. There's always different, every performance is unique. Then what's the point of releasing music?
Can I start answering that?
Go for it.
As an improviser, it's something that we talk about a lot in the sort of free improv world, and my conclusion is that as soon as you got this is going to be released, it becomes something completely different to the whole thing about improvising in front of an audience. It becomes a separate piece of art because it's there and people will listen to it as if it was composed, whatever. It becomes its own thing. And I think it's live improv is brilliant, but you know, some of my favourite sort of discs, especially Evan Parker's stuff, sort of the electroacoustic ensemble stuff. I've never managed to get to see that, but you know, there's just some amazing releases out there that came from improv. That, you know, it's no different to listening to recording of Beethoven. For me, it's what it is ultimately, I think it is, in relation to improvised music, I think it largely is promotion. It's quite a small scene, and if suddenly you have a disc released by a label, your name is likely to get known, you're more likely to get other people coming to you wanting to play with you, and that's paramount. And also, just like I always have a policy of giving quite a large number of CDs to the musicians on the label, and then the CD becomes a sort of like a calling card in a way for musicians, which is useful again in terms of forward. So I think that's the primary purpose. I mean, because I completely agree there's a contradiction in there somewhere about recording and preserving an improvised pieces. Exactly right.
I'd say for me, take off my chair, something a bit on my sound and music hat for a moment. It is about reach and allowing other people to have a way in. Because of course, particularly in improv, there's nothing replaces being in the room. You know, I feel absolutely privileged to have been at Tim Parkinson's event last night. In fact, he was filming it. And I will look forward to watching that, because it will remind me of being there and I can sort of recreate it in my own mind. But if you weren't there, it's like, if you don't know about what he does, how are you going to know to be in the room when it happens? So it is absolutely about kind of helping people get into it. And the other thing I'd say is that clearly what is no longer the point of recording, certainly in contemporary music, is about making lots of money. That's not something that I think anyone has.
Was it ever?
I don't know.
I mean, you could take the argument to its nth degree, couldn't you, and say, actually, you know, you see Mitsuko choosing to play a Mozart sonata. You go, you know, different performances. They're each unique creative experiences, aren't they? So, I mean, I personally don't ever think that recording is here to replace the live experience at all. But I remember years ago asking a young composer the value of having a recording, and he said, I thought it was such a brilliant way to describe it. He said that if composers can't create in a vacuum, and if no one's hearing your work, surely you're in a vacuum. That music is all about communicating and reaching out and making connections and creating conversations and all of that. And that actually, if people aren't hearing your music, it's sort of stifled. And so, absolutely, recording is a tool to have that work more widely.
And I think the people are out there who like listening to CDs. Like, for example, in my experience, I know that most of the improvisers think that you have to be in space to listen to an improvisation. This is the experience, this is the sharing. But at the same time, yes, like, it's not to replace what's happening there, but it's actually to create some other situations. Like, I really enjoy shutting all of the doors and then put my favorite CDs, and that's like 20 minutes or 15 minutes of my favorite experience with this composer or musicians. And I'm not trying to replace that, I'm not trying to fulfill my need because I wasn't there. I really purely enjoy the moment. Like the absolutely, completely solitary experience with the CD. So, yeah, I think there's a point.
And yes, and just completely agree with that. Until I started the label for 25 years or whatever, my experience of music was listening to CDs in my bedroom on my own, and I loved it. That was all the time. So I was grateful that people were listening.
Thank you, that was a really great question. Sarah, did you have?
No, it's fine, that's kind of actually.
Okay. Are there any other? Yes.
I just wanted to respond to your point about the opera last night being filmed.
Yes.
And I don't think we really talk very much about opportunities or value of having performance being filmed. Again, the phrase is called the CD can be a calling card. A film that is out on the web can also fulfill that role.
Yeah, it certainly can. I personally find YouTube videos, and you see the musicians making the sounds, I find them really frustrating. Not just because I don't have my laptop linked up to a decent sound system, so the sound crap on the little laptop speakers, but that's part of the problem. But it's just, I actually personally just find it quite an alienating experience watching a film where being in actual concert is somehow completely different and exciting. But that's not to say we shouldn't do it, because it in the same way as a CD can be a calling card, a YouTube video gets lots of hits. That's a very useful thing for musicians.
But it does come back to the quality. So not only are our laptop speakers rubbish, but actually whatever the film is made with, unless one's got budget, and a single camera, static, the other end at the back of the hall is particularly engaging.
Well, but Shaun.
I was just going to jump in there. Because, I'm in a duo called Hugs Bison that have been working, we've been doing a research project with Sound and Music about streaming. We do a lot of streaming of these sort of events, purely with webcams and things like that. But we've also been working with Tusker Festival in Newcastle, and we've been developing a much better system for that. Because they had some money, so we used 2 broadcast and cameras we streamed the entire festival for like 3 days. We lost 10 minutes in total. That's because the room there crapped out on us. But that's like broadcast standards, and we've got a really expensive transcoder, so that does a lot of the stuff for us. So when it is the computer's not sort of doing too much work, and we've had a lot of success with that. They're a small festival, they're in Newcastle, the venue won't hold so many, but they generally get about 200 people to the festival. And when we did, I've done all the figures for the 3-day festival, when we did the testings 1-day festival, we had 450 people watching during the course of the day. And then that's gone up to a couple of thousands now. and because we were doing live mixing, it wasn't just static and it was good quality. We had separate studio that do the live sound, we're also mixing the stream sound. So it was quite high tech way of doing it. It would cost you sort of quite a bit of money because the transport was 650 quid. The cameras we hire in, well, they're like 7 or 8 grand each to buy, sort of etc. Lots of cabling. But for Tusk, that's been worth it, and so we're looking at other avenues to move that forward.
Do you think there's ways of doing it that are cheaper, but still? Because one of the things I really liked about the way you streamed Tusk was it was the exact kind of parallel to what we talked about just now about kind of a recording, or rather, listening to something live is one experience, listening to something on CD in your own bedroom is another experience. They're both high quality experiences. One of the things I really liked about the way you streamed Tusk was it was very visceral. You kind of really, it wasn't like being there. It was a really great experience because you were kind of following artists onto the stage, and it felt very. You felt really in touch with it.
Well, again, yeah, I think we created an aesthetic of, because of the venue, you had to be in there. So the cameras tend to be ended up handheld, occasionally get knocked by the audience. So because it's quite in-your-face music, a lot of stuff that happens at Tusk. The aesthetic that we and I sort of did all the visual mixing live between the two cameras, sometimes overlaying, so it became its own thing. Very much, it wasn't like a studio. I think it goes back to what you said about your recordings compared with BBC, quite different. It's not like a standard concert video that we were broadcasting. It was in there. You were seeing sort of some action going on, and a lot of that was purely from where we could get. sort of we learned at the first one that you can't trail cables to an audience that's had a few beers. So we, for the 3-day festival, we had cables coming out of the ceiling in various points around the building, so we could unplug the camera, go to another point, plug it back in again, and then straight back into sort of shooting again and things like that. But you can, if you've got a decent DSLR that has live viewing, you can use that and get some really good quality things. YouTube stream sort of live with now. As well as a lot of the other one like Ustream, Justin.tv, that I've worked with in the past, are all becoming paid services, but YouTube's still free. The only thing watch out YouTube is that they have a thing that monitors for copyrighted music, and we discovered this because we did a broadcast in London, Cumbria and Atlanta, Georgia, and we got thrown off early on because I played some music between the first act and the second, and it flagged up and then shut us down. sort of, but yeah, there's, again, that's Vimeo, I think it is, are just starting to pay sort of prescriptions, not prescription, that's a couple of subscription, thank you, a subscription service that sort of we're having a look at whether that's a model for the future where you pay 50p, you watch it, and that soon that will sort of go to the artist.
Great. That was a really good question, so thank you. Are there any other comments, questions from you? Yes. Oh, yes, Pedro.
Either in parallel or before formal music education, when I was a teenager, lots of self-education in music came not only from listening to recordings, but also from reading liner notes, which provide a good deal of information about what we are listening. So when you go online to an online platform and have either streaming or downloading, do you have a strategy to make up for that lack of physical text in front of you, or some sort of Information resources that accompany.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we make a digital booklet available. Sometimes there are technical difficulties in getting all the services to pick up on those, but certainly anything that one comes to NMC for, there's a digital booklet there. And I know services like iTunes, you can bundle the booklet with it.
Like a PDF file that you can download?
Yeah. So it's a PDF version of, a digital PDF version of the booklet that you would see in the room. You do lose that sense of the tangible. It's like you put a book on a Kindle, so it's not quite the same, but it gives you the information. And of course, the other thing is, you'll get even more information for Dublin Arts by going to our website, where there's, it's an increasing area of development, lots of rich media content, and trying to understand the composition process and what's behind that. Check out our music lab.
When I release a CD, I always have a web page. I mean, I prefer the covers themselves to have as little writing as possible on, just aesthetically. But I agree with you. I remember that it's likely to being important. So I do have a web page for each disc, and I try to do a little interview with one of the musicians involved in the music song. So yeah, I think that stuff is important.
Not so Levite after all.
That's promotion.
And one final question, so Sarah.
Yeah, this is a question I was going to ask before, which probably be slightly answered, but it's actually about listening. And about how much you think about the way in which people actually listen. And I'm not talking about their consumer habits or the sort of end purpose of a CD going out, about promotion or just general awareness and reach, but actually about the listening experience. It's really struck Simon, you described two ways in which you listen. One, before you start the label, sitting in your room, door closed, on your own, long durational listening, as though you're in a concert, effectively. But then you also describe when people send you stuff, they send you a link, and you listen for 2 minutes, boom. And that's particularly for people who work in music, I think. There's that real tension between really, really quick listening, because you're trying to get through a lot of information and know about people. So I was just curious about whether you think your listeners to all of your CDs are the close the door and listen on your own in your bedroom or in your living room with your amazing sound system, or whether they're the kind of people who listen, like one does actually quite a lot on Spotify, just dip in and dip out again. That affects
I stopped doing scanning listening a couple of years ago, I think, because the information beyond the laptop screen accumulated more and more, and I realized that I was doing scanning listening, scanning watching, scanning understanding, scanning receiving information, and then I got fed up with it at some point, and I'm going to stop. And my whole point of making music right now is listening. So it's more than composing, I do listen to make music. So that's, again, connected to why I enjoy physical edition of music, because I have to make effort, I have to make effort to have the CD arrive, to open it, to actually put it on, watch it, and then just all of those things that we did in the 90s. I really value that, I appreciate it, and I think musicians, composers who spend lots of time and probably money to create pieces deserve that, as a reception, and it's like, I think we have to appreciate what the creation have gone through, and then just make effort to do all of those gestures to listen to the music. So I don't just scan the listen, and I do put the CD on. I mean, I really listen to it. So I don't really put CDs as a background anymore either. In that's why I don't have enough time to listen to all the CDs that I want to listen to. But then it's completely changed my idea of listening, and actually I like as well.
I think it's interesting because that's another, of course, side effect of technology, isn't it? I mean, we've got all these gadgets to help us do so many things, but of course that means that we've got less time to do anything. And I think that's a real challenge for how we present our music. I mean, from a practical point of view, we think very carefully about the order in which we'll perhaps have work on a disc. I think that's, it's kind of very basic, but actually it's quite an important thing. And we'll make big decisions about tracking. Particularly if you have long, to use a term, sort of through proposed works, actually we will use tracking, we will insert tracking to sort of help give access points. Because, not often does one have 60 minutes that one can sit down and just devote to. So, and I think then the bottom line is one just puts it out to the best quality one can, and then people can choose how they want to.
So you're kind of, by the careful choices you make about the order of tracks on any disc, you're also, I would read into that, is that you are having people who will listen to it from beginning to end on shuffle.
I think what you're doing is you're presenting it in a way that will make it most engaging to those who choose to listen to it through the thing. But obviously anyone can shuffle. And in fact, of course, anyone can not only shuffle, they can order it so that it comes, if they think they've got a better playlist, then they can, play order, they can create one.
When you won't be surprised with what I'm going to say, which is that I make the discs for the people who, like me, listen to it over a long period, and so that's absolutely how I want to listen to it. I'm aware that within a week of releasing anything, the disc is out there online, certain file sharing sites and being downloaded. I'm sure people listen to it in all kinds of weird, wonderful ways, and I've got no control over that. Yeah. So for me, then, there's a third circle of hell, and I don't really care. But as long as some people are, listening to it properly, in inverted commas, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I think I can't think of any artists that would do an album and for scanning, listening. Sort of, we all do it, but I think you've put your heart and soul into making this object, and you would love people to sit down and just really pay attention. Maybe that's more ego than anything, I don't know.
And also, I sometimes spend ages playing tracks in different orders, trying to decide what I think is the order that works best. So and I say I know people then do listen to them in random orders and things like that. But
I think that's important. It's a shame. I always think over the course of an album is narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
So from the first note through to the end, you're taking someone on a journey. Whether they choose to go on that journey is up to them. And sort of, but you want to make it. So I always try to make an album now of, you go through that stage of hating it, and then you do all the admin work, and then you get it out, and then you kind of forget about it for a couple of years, and it's when you come back to it and then shove it on and go, well, I actually enjoyed listening to that myself, because I've forgotten the ins and outs of all the business side of it, and that to me is when I'm most proud, when I can actually listen to myself once I've had that bit of space away from it.
We're going to have to wrap there, because and finishing on listening is a great place to stop, as I hope all of us are going to head over to St Paul's to listen to the first of the next wave concert. So thanks so much, and as I said at the beginning, sign up for surgeries with any of these amazing panellists, and I'd like to thank them for being so open and sort of frank and having such a great discussion today. So thank you, and thanks to Shaun for filming it, so it'll be online from tomorrow.
As soon as I can get it, I like to sit in the corner and get it up.